everybody, and welcome back to Colorfully Simone. So today we will be talking about art school and whether or not, in my experience, it was really worth it. I went to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, known as SAIC. It is attached to the Art Institute, the museum. I graduated last May, so yeah, about a year ago at this point, which is crazy because honestly time has flown so much. In that year I've had a lot of time to reflect and, to look at my student loan bills and to think back on whether or not SAIC was really worth it, worth my time, my money, my energy. I kind of narrowed it down to 5 things. First thing I think is really looking into a school and deciding whether you're going to utilize their resources to the utmost potential. Going to artist talks, different faculties, different media centers, the wood shop, there might be a film center. In the case of SAIC, we had an actual movie theater, and possibly internships or after school, connections. Definitely LinkedIn is prestige. And I think that's why people go to these big fancy private schools too, is because of the name. I think you really have to take advantage of these resources if you want to feel like your money is worth it. I was in the graphic design and painting department. There were so many different talks. So with the Art Institute, which was really cool, they would put on a visiting artist program and different artists, and that could be painting or, they might be in different mediums and whatnot. I think those talks are really cool to kind of see where artists later in their careers were, and they would often give advice and go through their careers up until that point. So those talks I think were really important, and again, all these things are things that you're paying for. I think as well as the resources to different facilities. So say you're in the sculpture department, are you going to use the wood shop or the metal shop? If you're in the painting department, how often are you going to go to those studios? Are you someone who just might work from your house? If I only ever took design classes, I would mostly just be paying for the teachers because it's only my laptop I'm really using. It's not even like I'm using any specific design facilities. Maybe going to a cheaper school if I wanted strictly that kind of thing might have been a better option. So with SAIC, they have their painting studios in the back of the Art Institute, which is super cool, and I feel like that's when you first kind of enter the school, you're just you feel so special in a way, walking down the street and you get to go into the back museum and you're holding your canvases and your easel and your paints and whatnot. It fades very quickly. I think it's definitely a cool thing at first to say and experience. Along with those resources you're paying for, like a career and experience program, I think that was something I should have taken advantage of earlier in the beginning. They help you a lot with interviews and internships and getting you connected and networked to things for your after school career. That's something so much that I recommend is to do as many freaking internships as you can, just because I think building your resume, your portfolio, as much as you can before you leave school is such a great idea. So the second thing I think would be taking advantage of the teachers, and I think teachers play such a big important role in going to school, and I think going to a specific school and an art school, and that's honestly, that's a big part of what you're paying for, because if there weren't the teachers, you just make work at home. I think the community, your classmates, and the teachers are one of the most important things. Something I look back on now is I wish I researched teachers earlier in the beginning. It took probably my first 2 years to realize that classes are completely different based on who is teaching that, and just listening to friends who might have taken the same class, but then the teachers were so different. Teachers really kind of set a standard for what the class might turn out to be. So I've had classes where I felt like the concept of the class was really interesting, maybe what we were doing day to day was somewhat interesting, but just because the teacher might be so lackluster or so unengaged with the student, it was kind of what am I paying for? Where is all my money flying away to right now? I think researching your teachers, and I think with art schools specifically, since most of them are artists themselves, or at least at SAIC, I think almost all teachers had careers outside of just teaching, but they all have websites. So I think looking up teachers, looking at their websites, looking at their portfolios, their artist statements, and they might not have to make the exact same type of work you do, but if you're kind of in tune with their concepts, if you've even asked friends if they've had that teacher, or if you look online, I think that's really important to figure out the faculty. You can even start doing that before, like around the time of applying, and just like looking at your specific school. You can see what classes they have, who teaches it, and kind of get a feel, because I feel like different schools have a different kind of selection of staff. And there were some teachers I had that I feel really close to, and I feel like looking back, I wish I even established more of a close relationship to them, and they could be a huge gateway and network and path for you after that. Like, for example, I had a teacher winter my last year who I just like felt was so similar to me identity-wise, and the work that she made. And in the class, I feel like we got pretty close, but then after that, I didn't really keep up that much. And the class was only like 3 weeks long, so it's just like a winter, like intern period. Then I went to her show a couple months ago, and it was like she recognized me, but it took a minute, and she was like, oh yeah, and I was like, does she actually remember me? I hope so. And it's just like, you also, I think in your senior year at that point, if you were thinking about applying to grad school or anything like that, want people like recommendation letters and stuff. But even beyond that, I think just creating a relationship is really important. Number 3. Speaking of, I think the number one golden question and the number one thing is money. Money, money, money. Art school is really freaking expensive. I think depending obviously where you go, but I mean all of them are going to be privately owned. They're probably going to be between at least $30,000 to $60,000. I mean mostly probably like $40,000 to $70,000 just off the bat. If you don't get a great scholarship, and if you don't come from like a hella rich family, it might not be worth it. I think if you have your dream school and it has a set, but you end up not getting money from them, I would really reevaluate whether you want to go there or not, because just taking out a mass amount of loans, and I'd be really wary about taking out private loans, but anything like that in the long run isn't worth it. So I would either, apply to a bunch of schools, see which gives you the best scholarship, and if you're not getting sufficient amount of money, maybe just going to a smaller art school, maybe a public school, a community school, until maybe you build up your portfolio, your grades, whatever, so that way you get more money, and applying to scholarships, obviously. But I feel like scholarships are one of those things where everyone's like, there's so many out there, like, apply to this. And then, like, it's actually really hard to get. If you don't get the money, you don't have the funds, and you're like, let me just pay $60,000 a year. That's kind of crazy, and I would advise against doing that. So you do get a pretty good scholarship, but you still have to pay. I think it depends on, what you're really looking for at the school. Again, is it just like the name? Is it like this school is exactly specifically a program that you want? It's a whole general learning experience, socially, emotionally. I wouldn't say really physically, but career-y. Yeah. 4. Experimenting and having, utilizing all those resources and those programs, those different teachers, and by your last 2 years, like very much narrowing it down. So I know a lot of colleges already do this because you have to pick majors, but with SAIC specifically, it's interdisciplinary, which means you can literally just do anything for your 4 years. I'd highly recommend against that. In your first 2 years, take classes in different departments. Maybe you think you're going in doing painting, but then I took like an art therapy class one semester, or like a fibers and materials class another one. And yeah, by your 3rd year, really narrow down into what you want to do, and I think that's because it grants you to, 1, higher classes in those departments, but also you're building up a somewhat cohesive portfolio, and those are things that are going to be really important stepping outside of school and going into your career. These are all things that, like, my experience of being a first-generation college student, my experience of going in not being super wealthy, but I mean, if you have so much money, do whatever the hell you want. Number 4 is basically just experimentation in the beginning, but narrowing down to have a useful practice and skills for some sort of career after. Number 5, go in with a mindset of exactly what you want. The question of is something worth it, I think really comes down to, are you making it worth it? How is it worth it to you? Because so many people go into art school not knowing what they want out of it, or not knowing what they're doing, and going into it thinking that it's just going to be easy and that they're just going to float and float by and they realize it's really, really actually a lot of work. It's really hard. You have your art classes, your academic classes. If you have to have a job, you have a job. A lot of people go into it not knowing what they want out of it, and that's automatically going to make it not worth it. You know, when you're applying to school or thinking about going to art school, really ask yourself, like, why? And if it's like comes down to, oh, I think it might be cool, or it's an image thing, but you're not actually going to be there to put in the work, and you're not already, you know, making art, then I think, yeah, it's not worth it. But I think if you're going to go into it and you have your exact goals in mind, even if, you know, those goals change over time, I think already from the very get-go, jumping in with a set mindset, that's going to make your whole experience. In my experience, coming down to it all, I definitely think it was worth it if you're going in for the right things and you have the right financial ability. Let me know if you want to see any other videos kind of talking about my experience or things that I learned from it other than just is it worth it. Thank you so much again for watching. Remember to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, watch other videos, and I'll see you probably next week. Thank you.